Okay, we should be live. Hi, everyone.
Awesome. Hello. Welcome back to the Stream of Truth. I am Dr. Tassel Faith Shamebrook.
And I'm Sean Kelly. Sorry, I was looking at the stream and making sure it went live. Wasn't really paying attention.
Awesome. So we are here Monday afternoon, and this is episode 7, and the topic is, why do they trigger me?
Right.
And we're going to talk about how to manage getting triggered and how to release our old stories and bring through new stories.
Yeah, juicy. And by happenstance, which, well, I guess it's not happenstance at all. We tend to talk about things that are directly influencing us the day we are sort of, as we prepare for the streams, just to like share some of our process with everyone. We don't pick topics the day before or anything like that, like you might assume people would. We tend to just see what's going on for us and deal with that. And so this morning we had this little exchange between us, and both of us had these various experiences of it and got triggered in our different ways. And we called each other all these horrible names, and then
it was very violent.
Yeah, it was very abusive, I would say. We were both very abusive to each other. No, none of that. But I think we try to like follow. My point, I guess, is that we try to follow the themes of the day, and where that leads us gives us usually a nice topic to chat about. And in this case, that's what worked for us. And so it's been a good day so far. So maybe I don't know, how do you want to start? Do you also I guess I should say our mission statement's below in the description if you guys want to check that out. We were initially like saying that every time, but we decided to just leave it in the description. So if you're wondering what this is, what we're doing, check that out. So how did you want to start the conversation?
I kind of want to start by saying that getting triggered has been a big part of my relationship with you.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's great.
I think I just snorted. And that is to say, no, I'm not, there's no criticism. What I really understand from a large
I feel wounded and triggered right now.
My statement that I get triggered by you then just triggered you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm laughing so much because it has been just like a wild ride, I would say, in our relationship. The triggering and the, sometimes for me, the intense feelings that arise. And then also talking to you can also be an adventure as well about all of it.
Yeah.
So I'm laughing because I just think it's such an important part of a relationship. And it's been, I would say, very challenging for me. So I'm super excited to talk about it. Because I want to share what we go through and ways that we've learned to manage it and really actually in the end be thankful for it. And then the more I talk about it, the more insight I have about getting triggered and how to move through it with as much grace and peace as possible. So I'm super excited about this topic. I just want to say that.
Yeah, and I guess I'll share that for my experience, my entire life has been that I trigger people. Like that's been my whole story of always seeming to say just the correct wrong thing. And I know a lot of people have that experience. And so for me, it can be very frustrating I guess because usually when I trigger people, I'm really not at all intending any of that.
Yeah.
And so it could feel a little bit like, why do I speak? Right? Like, and so
Why do I speak?
why do I speak to?
I just always get into trouble.
I get myself in shit if I talk. So, yeah, so I could feel like that. But I have a sort of, I guess that leads into sort of what are triggers? Like, where do they come from? Why do they come up? And I guess what I'll say is that our triggers are because of the stories that we have around whatever the concept is that's triggering us. So for me, I have the story that I trigger people. And so when I do that and then people get upset, I then get triggered because I'm, re-experiencing that story, reliving that story, and that story's getting sort of empowered in my energy, whatever, in my consciousness. And that's actually the purpose of the triggering, or of the noticing of the disharmony in yourself. It's all sort of there for us to then balance. So humans, like all humans talking, will always trigger each other in all these different ways. And it's to serve the balancing for both people. So it's good to, I think, to like take a step away from it. We had talked about this, like to have a bit of try to have a higher perspective on it.
Yes.
Where we understand that really what happened, the specifics aren't super important.
Yes.
More that the activity of becoming imbalanced around that conversation is there to learn how to be balanced.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, absolutely. I love everything you said. And maybe to start, if you're okay with this, I'll just sort of share
what happened. Yeah.
So we're not speaking about it so abstractly, and then we can break it all down. So
Sure.
so we were texting, you and I were texting, and you kind of made this little joke. That's a joke that you said you had made with some of your male friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I got triggered from this joke.
Mm-hmm. I would like to I would just like to add, it sounds like it could be this like dirty or misogynistic thing or something. It's not like that. It's just a joke I had with my friends. That was more of like an in joke, and I just randomly used it. Yes. And it did not land.
Well, it landed.
It landed somewhere. It just didn't land in the right place.
Maybe not the way that was intended.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I felt the trigger was I felt hurt by the joke.
Mm-hmm.
And as triggers do, it opened up a whole ocean of feelings, intense feelings. Intense feelings came up, and these feelings were around sort of like not being treated the way I think I want to be treated, or something like that. Like,
yeah.
And this is a big story of mine. It's a big story of mine, particularly with men. And just to be honest, really originated in my family of origin. And I can see how I've been carrying that story for all these years. So that's when I'm in my higher perspective about it. So then what happened was we jumped on Zoom and we were just discussing what happened. And I got pretty emotional. And we talked about this too, that it seems that between us sometimes like a sort of a small thing will happen. It's like a small trigger, but it opens up big feelings, these oceanic type feelings.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I was experiencing in that moment. So what you did was not what you did, but what happened was very innocent and small, but it opened up just a vast ocean of intense feelings for me. And I think that's why I got upset. The upset was not really about the small interaction between you and I. It was about wounds that I've been carrying for a long time and a story that I've been carrying for a long time.
Yeah, and then on my side, when I noticed how, like, at first in the text, I didn't realize how much it affected you or what you were going through with it. So I was like sort of taken aback by that. And then on my side, I just started being like, oh my God, I'm doing it again. And then I felt bad, right? I felt like, why do I say these stupid things that upset people? For like, I could have just not done that. And so then there's like guilt and shame and different things that come up around that. While also sort of having this orientation of like an awareness that it's not really what I said. It's more just that that these, like you said, these emotions are deeper or older, whatever, that come up from what I said. So like what I said led to those coming up, and it really doesn't have anything to do with me.
Yes.
So I have a bit of an awareness of that, but at the same time, it could feel, it ends up feeling like non-acceptance. It feels like I'm not being accepted, like my expression's not accepted from people.
Yes.
So that story comes back up, and then I can, like I said, I can feel like, well, I just probably shouldn't really talk to people because.
So would you say like that was your trigger that you experienced was, oh, I'm not accepted?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And is that a story that has been sort of present in your life?
Yeah, that would be the root of all of it. So generally, I would say I'm accepted by people that know me, generally.
Yeah.
But these moments of when I say something and it really upsets somebody and they flip out or get really upset, it feels like I've hurt them. I feel like I've done something wrong, which is not quite accurate. And it basically, in my just the intention on everything that I say is never to hurt anyone. So if someone's hurt, then I feel like I messed up. But there's also a part of me that sort of understands that I'm in that moment, my expression's not accepted, right? So that sort of flows into a general, I guess, acceptance. I'm not accepted by people unconditionally. There are conditions upon my acceptance. And I guess that doesn't feel so good. So that's I guess the point is that both of us were looking at, we experienced this interchange, which caused us to both then have to like look at these stories we hold.
Yes. Right? Yes. And I think what we experienced today, and we've experienced it previously, is that we're having like a human experience, partly like the human is sad or is feeling the emotions, and it's at times challenging for the other person to be with that. And then at the same time, we also are able to kind of toggle up to the higher perspective that, oh, look what I'm seeing about myself. Mm-hmm. Look what triggers me. Look where there's some pain within me. And then look at this story that I'm almost looking for evidence for to reinforce the story.
That's a really important point. Whatever our beliefs are, we've talked about this a little bit. I don't know if we've talked about it on stream, but whatever beliefs we hold, even if they're like not at the surface, they're just sort of buried and whatever, they always come up and show, we see evidence to reinforce the belief.
Yes.
That's how the ego reinforces the negative belief structures.
Yes.
And it's the same with positive belief structures. So whatever our belief structure is at the sort of base or core of whatever's going on, we will find evidence to reinforce that. So that's why these things happen. Is this exchange, we found evidence to reinforce a story we held, and the story feels bad because it's not true. It's not a true representation of what's actually occurring.
Yes.
So our emotional guidance system is saying this is not true. It doesn't feel good.
Yes.
This is wrong.
Yes.
And the less evolved approach to it, or the less, I don't know, present approach to it, is to blame the other person for showing you the story, right?
Yes.
Look at what they said. How dare they say that? Whatever. That's generally like the reaction, right?
Yeah, I think my younger self in this type of interaction, I would have just stopped there. I would have just been like, maybe upset that you had texted that or something. And I would have just maybe stopped there and not really looked inside of me. Oh, what is happening with me? And what story am I holding about this? I think just stopped there and not looked at myself at all.
Yeah, that's like the normal, like before we become aware that any of this disharmony we feel is our own stuff and we need to look at it.
Yes.
We tend to not look at it because it's uncomfortable. So whenever we're uncomfortable, like the ego's oriented to comfort generally. So
yes.
Whenever anything is uncomfortable, the ego goes, oh, that's no good. We don't like that. So let's not do that. So it starts to become like this conscious presence that around these things.
And the ego might say something like, I don't want you to do that again. Or could you please not do that again because I don't like it.
Right. Yeah.
So the ego wants the external world to change so the ego can feel better.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so ideally, when I get triggered, I want to just, oh, look what is happening inside of me. Look at these feelings that are coming up and look at the stories I'm holding, and the understanding that because I'm holding these stories, I'm holding that energy, I have drawn in this exact experience with someone because it's a match to my frequency. And if I look at it from the higher perspective, I can really, in the end, be grateful. Oh, look what energy I must be holding, that this experience is coming in, and look at the story I'm holding. Do I want to keep this story going? Do I want to energize the story, or maybe is it time to let the story go?
Exactly. And that's the most important, by letting the story go and noticing that it's not really true. It's just sort of a story that was told to explain the experiences you were having.
Yes.
It's not really true the way that it's sort of perceived. When we let go of the stories, we'll generally stop experiencing the things that, because the story isn't there anymore. So there's no, you could say the higher self's no longer going to call attention to it.
Yeah, because it's been neutralized or dissolved.
Yeah, it's been accepted and forgiven and let go.
So then I could maybe experience the same exact joke from you, and I would not have a response. It would not trigger me because I wouldn't be
you basically
fitting that into this old story.
Yeah, you would just be like, I don't get the joke.
Yeah.
Sean's weird sometimes. That's funny.
Yeah.
Whatever. And just move on. Like it wouldn't even really notice it. You'd just be like, I don't understand this guy's jokes sometimes.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And the funny thing about the joke is that no one would understand it. No one would get it. It's an in-joke. It wasn't even like you'd have to be within that particular group of friends that I did that with to even have any idea of what's going on with that. That's why we didn't bother explaining what the joke was, because no one would even understand it. It's stupid.
Right.
So So yeah, like if you weren't polarized around that particular thing, then it would just be a silly thing that was a bit of nonsense, and you would have just probably glossed over it. And then on my side, like I was polarized around acceptance and around not being accepted, things like that. So there was parts I needed to see as well. Same thing. And that tends to be the case when it's like two people that are conscious of sort of their soul evolution. They're in a process of ascension, aware of it, doing their best to like notice these things. That's when like two people tend to be in the situation we're in, where we don't point the finger so much at each other. We are, it's uncomfortable, feels bad. There's a strong, I would say a strong, in my case, there's like I wouldn't say strong, a feeling of she's doing something wrong. Right?
Oh, that comes up for you.
It's like it like approaches, and then I go, that's crazy, right? And I don't really listen to it.
Is that, and I'm just curious, does that come up when I start talking about a trigger, or if I get like emotional about it? At what point does that come up?
It comes up for me. Okay, so this is gonna sound bad.
Well, I first just want to honor that you're speaking your truth on our show, The Stream of Truth.
Yeah.
I really want to honor that. And I want to do the same thing. I want to say things that might sound bad, but are true.
Right.
That I'm sort of working. And to share that with other people. So I just want to, good for you, Sean.
I'll do my best. I'll
try to say something that it sounds bad on my end.
Sure. I would
maybe I already have.
I'd like to start by saying that we notice imbalances in others easier than we see it in ourselves. The purpose of that is to notice the imbalance in the other person is actually your own imbalance. It's a mirror, usually like a polar opposite, or somehow related to your own imbalance.
Okay.
So that's why we're able to notice when other people are acting out of alignment with their truth sometimes, or we're able to just notice. And so something that I'm able to notice, sort of what seems to be innately, is the insanity of this place, and like the general orientation of people just feels insane to me. So when anybody says anything, like when they get upset about something I say, I have a part of me that is sort of like, it's almost like briefly judging and saying sort of like, what they're saying is insanity. It's nonsense. I'm aware that I wasn't doing what they're experiencing, and that the only reason they're experiencing it is because of their own stories. Mm-hmm. And so a part of me can just, like, I can feel a little like, I don't know, deal with your problems. Sort of. Not so much with you, like, where I don't, like, I pull away or whatever. It's just it's a like a undercurrent of like, I think I said earlier, like, I get tired of it. Like, I get tired of constantly having to defend and explain myself to people. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't need to if people weren't so insane. And so I can have this like impatience around it, I guess. Even though I have the same issues, I do the same things. So I'm aware that like people say things to me on occasion, and I'll it might trigger me or whatever. So yeah, there's a part of me that's like that, and then there's a part of me that feels bad for causing suffering. And then there's a part of me reminding myself that I didn't cause the suffering. I'm not responsible for people's feelings. I can only be responsible for mine. all I can do is try to have positive, like service oriented intention.
Yeah.
That's really all I can do. Beyond that, what people get from me is their own business. So I'm aware of that as well. And then I like, so I have all these like conflicting thoughts and ideas and feelings, I guess, around these types of things.
Yeah.
Because I'm still trying to, I guess, like hold the higher perspective, but also empathize and sympathize from that human level as well.
Yeah.
You know, like find the balance there or something.
Yes.
So I'm trying to do that, I think, is really what's happening with me.
I think it's so amazing for you to share all the different parts that come up in a situation like this. And you know, probably in any type of situation that's maybe a little challenging. And I just think that's great to talk about, that we may have lots of parts come up in these interrelational interactions.
Yeah.
And some of them we might feel like frustrated or even shame about, like, oh my God, I thought this, and maybe we're judging how we feel. We're judging the parts that come up around these things.
Yep, I do that too. I should say, like, when I get impatient,
yeah,
I judge myself for being impatient as well.
Right.
So yeah, the whole thing is a bit of a mess for me.
Yeah.
Because I recognize I don't want to be impatient around people. I want to be compassionate, sympathetic.
Yes.
I do understand what they're going through.
Yeah.
I've went through it a whole bunch myself.
Yes.
But at the same time, I have to sort of detach my responsibility from what they're experiencing, because they're not experiencing my thought. They're experiencing their own, right?
Yes.
And it's their own narrative and distortion of the way they're perceiving what's occurring that's causing the disharmony. It really doesn't have anything to do with what I said.
Yeah. And so we have talked about that often, especially in a partnership like this, if one person gets triggered and sort of starts sharing about it, the other person may get triggered too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it feels important just to be aware of that
Yep.
This is like a delicate arena we're entering. And I think you and I are sort of constantly thinking about what is the highest and best way to handle these situations for our own peace and for the peace of our relationship. And to be honest, I'm not sure what the best way to handle it is. I mean, one way to handle it would be like anytime maybe I felt triggered, emotionally raw or whatever, I would just go off by myself and do some type of practice and feel my feelings. And that's like my main practice, just to feel it all. And then come back to talk to you or something, or maybe we can talk about it all. We
both tend to do sort of the opposite, or we have, I guess, more natural inclination to do the opposite thing. So like when you're experiencing a lot of emotion, your inclination generally is to immediately discuss it, or like during it, right?
Yeah.
And mine is usually to observe it all and try to, like a scientist or something.
Yeah.
And talk about it later when I sort of know I have a better comprehension of like what happened. Part of that is, I think, due to like my inability to properly articulate my emotions in the moment of experiencing them. I have difficulty like putting into words the exact feelings I'm having. I feel like we talked about the different aspects that come up. I think that's part of it for me, is they all feel very poignant or potent in their own ways.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to talk about it because each thing I say sort of conflicts with another aspect. So I have to sort of figure out where I land on these things.
Okay.
Before I can talk. That's how it feels to me anyway. So that's how I do it. And I don't know what the best way is. I think a balance between the two. But if we're ever coming at anything reactionary, we're almost guaranteeing some sort of
Oh, yeah,
exchange.
totally. And I feel what I've been trying to do, and I don't know if this is what your experience is, but what I've been trying to do is just be truthful. This is what I'm experiencing about this, with no blame
Yeah.
and no asking like anyone needs to change anything, but oh, this is what I'm experiencing. And then often I'll talk about how I can see it ties into past stuff with other people. Um, and what it feels like is a little tricky is if I say start to cry.
Hmm.
If I show a lot of emotion, that starts to feel, ooh, I think this is maybe difficult right now for you if I cry.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, obviously. And I'd say that, yeah, no, you do a really good job of not directly blaming me for your feelings. Um, like you don't do that. I can't recall you doing that anytime recently. And yeah, you don't ask me not to do things. You don't ask me to change anything. So all of that's great. I still experience a I like an awareness, like I brought this thing to you, right? So if you're upset about something that I've done that has to do with me,
Yeah.
that's when I feel like, even if you're not saying
Yeah.
anything bad or anything that has to change, it can still
Yeah.
feel like criticism or feel like non-acceptance, things like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but that's my own thing. That's my interpretation of your intention expressing yourself while not judging.
Yeah.
I still feel the judgment. So it's a perfect example too of like why we can't really be responsible, because no matter how you talk about your pain that you're going through, I'm gonna know that I did it. Or, if we're looking at it from that perspective, that I said a thing and these things happened, so I started the train or whatever, right? Um, which isn't really true either. But
Right. And I think, yeah. And I just think there's just like, these can just be challenging emotional situations, because if someone is crying, it can feel intense.
mhm.
Um, so like I totally understand that. And
And then, like, I don't want you upset in general,
right,
right? Like, I don't want that. So
right.
especially if I'm the one that seems to have caused it,
Yeah.
then it can, yeah, it's hard. It's hard. It really hits me on those spots where I'm like very shaming myself for
Right.
my blabbermouth or
Right.
my behavior, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm an
Yeah.
odd person and I do things and it bugs people. And it can be, for me, it can be, it's varying levels of intensity, but
Yeah.
um, it can be a real pain in the ass, honestly, for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then I can like judge myself and all that stuff. It doesn't even matter really what you say. Once I realize that I've done it and you're upset, it's like I just take all that responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's I think the important thing when we're triggered, we don't put the responsibility on others.
Yes.
And when they're triggered, we don't take the responsibility from them.
Yes.
It doesn't mean
Yes.
we don't like have compassion or sympathy for how they're feeling, especially
Yes.
especially if we can really relate.
Yeah.
But it really is their thing to deal with, or your thing to deal with.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's good to talk about it, but only if
Yeah.
people can be balanced around it.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. I love what you just said. And I feel like I want to highlight that as maybe sort of tip number one about uh, moving through triggering as peacefully and graciously as possible. is what you said. You said it so beautifully, that if you are triggered, we can look at it from the perspective of, it is not the other person's responsibility that I have been triggered right now.
Right.
And then if you're talking to someone who has been triggered, maybe by something that occurred between the two of you, you can take a step back and not take responsibility for what their experience is.
Right. Yeah.
And then that most likely could enable you as sort of the listener to hold space, perhaps, for, maybe some emotions that are coming up for that person.
Yeah, exactly. If you take responsibility for their stuff, you're joining them in the insanity. And from that place,
I just want to pause there about the word insanity, because I think what we're saying is, in the end, these triggers are helping us. It's not insanity, right? The triggers are showing us where we're in illusion or where we hold old stories.
The reason I use the word insanity is because I guess I've felt my whole life that this place is not sane. So Eckhart Tolle talks about it a lot as well, that that the human conditioning from our society and all these other things directly is confused and is insane. And these distortions, it doesn't, I'm not saying that it's insane in a way that is negative, but it's not properly seeing reality, basically. So it's sort of being delusioned. It's delusion. Deluded. It's deluded thought. So insane. Yeah. It's but when I say insane, I don't mean it means it's a bad state to be in either. It's the perfect state to be in, because it's through the uncomfortableness of being in that insanity that leads someone out of it, because they start to see that this can't be the way I'm supposed to be, whatever it is. Like it begins to feel too bad. They begin to notice that they're deluded, but they have to be deluded to notice the delusion.
Yeah. I honor, if you want to use that term to talk about this. I think for me, especially as a psychotherapist, to me, there's just a lot of associations with that word.
There are.
That maybe are not what we are meaning about it. So that's a word
that's
that
true.
I wouldn't use.
I don't mean people are all needing to be psychiatrically seen and that they're broken in some way, or I just mean that generally speaking here, people are quite deluded. That's all I would mean. They live in their own delusions. I do too. Yeah.
And to me, this process that we're talking about is, in the end, I think very healthy and beneficial, because it just is shining light on our, you might use the word delusions, I might use the word stories. To me, again, stories has a little more of a neutral association for me, because I really want people to be comfortable in when they have these experiences, to not judge themselves and not feel like they're doing something wrong, but that stuff is coming up for us to look at. And in the end, I think this is a healthy process, especially if we can use our own strategies that we seem to be improving on every day of how to move through these.
Yeah. And I guess any of these terms that I talk about to reference the I guess, lack of presence. That's really the best way I could describe it. Is the person is going into the story
Yeah.
instead of being present, and
Yeah.
so the lack of presence
Yeah.
shows up as stories, or what I said.
Yeah.
I called it delusion.
Yeah.
Really, it's the same thing. I don't mean, like, when I say delusion, I don't mean that that's a bad thing. It's serving its perfect purpose.
Yeah.
To show us what we're confused about.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't mean it. I also do really want to highlight that they're sort of, stories, it sounds almost nice, right? And neutral and whatever. I guess when I say delusion, it helps me to highlight that this is something we're trying to move out of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I love stories. Who doesn't love stories, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's why I use that word, is because it has an understanding to it that you're misperceiving.
Yeah.
Not that that's bad. That's actually good. Once you see that you're misperceiving, then you're halfway there. So,
and I think also that the story may have originated from a non-delusional experience, right? Something in your childhood where you experienced something that was real, and then you kept sort of bringing that story forward. Oh, this is the way people are going to always interact with me because this happened in my childhood. This is just, this is it.
Yeah, usually a real, like, a thing happens, and it is more or less
delusional. Yeah.
It is more or less what happened, right? You were not accepted, you were not whatever.
Yes.
And it did happen that way. And then the story starts to form around people always do this, etc. Right?
Yes. Yes. And that is where we may be in an illusion about it.
But also the forming of it came from both being confused, right? Like, the whole event that experience that began the story also was confused.
Meaning that in that originating situation, the higher perspective would be that there was learning and expansion for us. Is that part of what you mean?
Sorry, I think the stream cut out there for a second. Hopefully we're okay now. I think we're okay. I think my internet just blipped there. What I was trying to say is that delusion forms the structure for further delusion.
Yeah.
And then we build on the delusion until it becomes so confused that it starts to pop up all the time.
Yeah.
And then we realize that has to change, that there's a thing that's constantly happening and something's off with it, and then we go to try and resolve it.
Yeah.
But the entire, usually the incident between the person and the other person when they were kids or whatever is also diluted from a misunderstanding of the world and how things work here. Because as kids, we're not taught any of it. We're not taught anything about our emotions. We're not taught anything. We're literally just told to comply and then sent on our way, generally. And so we have no framework to understand the world properly. And so we're confused pretty much from the beginning.
Yes. So now here we are. And hopefully we have a better understanding. So what are our main, if we were just to summarize, like, oh, me and my partner, we seem to trigger each other, and sometimes we get into arguments and it's destabilizing. What can we offer? Just a few like tips? What are some that, and you mentioned the first one was we each take responsibility for our own triggering and our own emotions that come up.
Yeah.
And as we listen to the other person, we do not take responsibility for what's coming up for them.
And that is hard. I'll say it's hard.
Yeah.
The more attached you are to that person and like the relationship and stuff, the harder it is. So, but that is the way to resolve that.
And
issue.
that is such a global practice in every aspect of our relationships. Is that's just huge for everything. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's number one. What would be like the second thing we might offer as a tip strategy for this?
If you're, I would say, like, if you're oriented to be reactionary,
yes,
then it's totally fine to express how you feel.
Yes.
But almost like that classic interrelation therapy modality where it's I feel, not you did this.
Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, you almost talk about things that way. If you have to talk about it while upset,
yes,
the best thing to do is honest expression of how you're feeling.
Yes.
And not putting it on anyone.
Not you did this, you are like this, you always do this.
Right.
We stay away from that. Yeah, just very basic. This is how I am feeling right now. Yeah.
I think if you feel like you have to talk about it, because talking about it is sometimes very useful and sometimes it's less useful. It really depends. But if you revert to judgment, the other person's going to defend themselves, and then it just becomes a
Yeah, absolutely. And then maybe like step number 3 is it could be before you talk about it with your partner, or it could be after, but to take some time and sit with yourself and really just on your own, just feel everything that is there, just on your own. Just take some time on your own to do that. And notice if it seems like sometimes the higher self kind of shows you the other experiences in your life where this same feeling was present and this story was present, and you can really see it in black and white, and like, oh my gosh, this is something I now see, and I can choose to maybe let this go.
And that's the point of it. So
yes, that's the point.
The talking about it and the experience, the emotion and the negativity feelings or the uncomfortableness, all of that stuff is meant to lead you to a place where you can let go of the story.
Yes.
So you can be grateful that you even have this capacity to see these things.
Yes.
As uncomfortable as it is.
Yeah. It's really, what's that saying? Like, we really usually only change when we have to, or there's a more elegant way of saying that.
Yeah.
But it's from all that discomfort that comes up that we sort of have the motivation to really look at this and be like, you know what? I don't want to reenact that again. So I'm going to look at this story. I'm going to feel the feelings, and I might be able to just clear it and not sort of draw in a parallel situation.
Right. And that's why couples will argue about the same thing.
Yes.
Every week or whatever. Again. They just argue because neither of them are really going within about it or looking at what's causing them to get so upset. They're just blaming each other. And
yes, it's so easy. Just like, well, he's the problem. She's the problem. Mm-hmm. I'm not doing anything.
Right.
And then, okay, so we talked about responsibility. We talked about sticking with I feel statements, just your own experience. We talked about taking some time on your own to feel everything and maybe see the different experiences where you felt this way and the story. And then what about, like, what story do I want to have going forward on this topic? What story feels good inside of me? What story feels expansive? What story feels like I'm choosing love and faith? And so for me, I want to spend a little time today, probably feeling a little bit more. And then, well, what new story am I going to choose to carry around my relationships? And just really work to land in that story and feel the energy of that story. How does that feel? And integrate that new story for myself.
And The
And I just want to say super quickly, this is big because depending how old you are, some of these stories are like decades entrenched in your neural pathways of your brain.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll generally find it difficult to write a new story for that area until we reduce the charge of the old one.
And
you could sort of think of it as like two avenues of thought with different charges. And so you have to charge your positive belief structure over the negative belief structure, and that will orient you to go that way naturally, which will decay the negative belief structure.
And on that topic, is feeling your feelings around the old story the most, and using your insight the most effective way to depolarize that old story, you think?
I think it varies from person to I think it's really unique. So there's always an application of love, and then there's an application of wisdom.
Yes.
And they're different ratios, I guess. To what helps people dissolve the stories. For me, I dissolve them through understanding that the story isn't even how the reality works. The story, the world does not work the way the story claims. Reality doesn't work that way. So my story is wrong, and that allows me to very quickly just cut it off at the knees or something, right? Then all I really do is look at the opposite polarity of the story. And so in this case, it could be something like, oh, I've never been accepted. No one's ever accepted me. No one ever will, etc. I realize that that's because I don't accept myself, and then I choose to accept myself, which will sort of have a domino effect on everything else. Knowing that the story is nonsense, it's insanity. And I shouldn't use that word insanity, but that's what it is. That's what it is.
Yeah, that's what it feels like to you.
That's the best word that I could think of to describe unconscious behavior, like unconscious fear and separation. It's the path of what is not. It's delusion and insanity. Yeah.
I honor that is the word.
I know the words themselves, they have meanings behind them that are distorted. There's stigmas, and there's, but we're limited by our language.
Yeah, totally. And maybe this seems like an obvious point, but I just want to say it partly from my own understanding, is that we can just run a story through our being and see how it feels to know if it's the truth or not.
Yeah.
And a story that feels bad and feels constricting and depressing.
It's not real. There's
that's
something about it. Like a lot of it, 90% of it may be fairly real, right?
Yeah.
But there's a part of it that we're confused about. That's causing, and that's I believe that's our higher self literally going, ooh, no, I'm not going to look at this with you.
My understanding is that when we have that type of negative feeling, it's because we are out of resonance with how our higher self, higher consciousness feels about the same topic.
We're having what I call a digression of thought between the higher self. So the higher self is always repeating the original thought to us.
Yeah.
That the original thought of creator, they're always repeating that to us. Yeah. And whenever we fall out of harmony with that original thought, we feel bad. And that's any thought that denies our perfection and our divinity. Anything that denies our perfection will feel bad.
Yes. So again, this is probably obvious, but we know that we have a story that serves our highest and best if it feels good and expansive, and we can breathe, and that there's good energy there.
It means that it's based in truth. It doesn't necessarily mean that what we're envisioning will come to light the exact way we envision it.
Right.
But it's aligned with a true version or a true self, like our,
Yeah.
like it's expansive, infinite possibilities.
Yes. It's like a
I'm
path.
capable, I'm
Yeah.
confident, I'm
Yeah.
perfect to do the thing I want to do.
Yes.
It's more about, it's more about
It's
that.
an orientation.
Right. It doesn't mean that, it feels good that I'll be a doctor tomorrow, so I'll be a doctor tomorrow or something, right? Like that won't just become true because it feels good.
Right. The story would be,
Yeah,
I am capable of pursuing what's really important to me. And
exactly.
the universe is
Yeah,
supporting me always.
yeah. And the particulars of the
The
3D or
details.
the
Yes.
physical reality aren't
Yeah. We
really,
don't know exactly how that might unfold.
they're not really important.
Right.
It's more how we think about ourselves
Yes.
or how we
And
feel about
how,
ourselves.
yes. Okay. So we made 4 points. And then another point is, I think, is to have gratitude for the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And really to have gratitude for your partner or whoever has triggered you, that they have helped you see this story in yourself and helped you
Yep.
change the orientation, hopefully. So,
And that will depolarize or decharge the story too. The gratitude.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
I think in our society, we can tend to look poorly at like what seems to be conflict or disharmony or feeling bad temporarily, like, oh, there's something wrong here, like we shouldn't have these experiences with each other. There
Right.
must be something wrong with me, you, both of us. What's going
We could
on?
use the example of a vegan who's very compassionate to animals, just cannot accept that other humans will eat animals. Just
Yeah.
can't get past it. And whenever they notice meat, they get a little triggered. They
Yeah.
get triggered by burgers. They get triggered by seeing somebody eating a hot dog, or these types of things.
Yeah.
That's gonna, like, that noise of
Yeah.
that confusion is gonna go. And I should be careful the way I speak. This is a very polarizing topic. I'm not suggesting that someone who's oriented that way is wrong. What I'm suggesting is that their discomfort within themselves around what they're seeing in the reality is sort of there. There's a lot of opportunity there to look at where this comes from and why it's such a narrative through the experience, and to ultimately, like, let go of it. Just not doesn't mean you change your preference or bias or, like, belief around what is better, like whether it's better to eat or not eat animals, right? You're not necessarily changing your view. You're just adjusting your orientation around experiencing the way the world is now.
That you can cultivate a peace within yourself, no matter
Yeah.
what is going on, that you may not like or agree with necessarily.
Yeah.
And so I think the point I want to make here is that these triggerings and the stuff that comes up for each of us in our interactions with our loved ones is ultimately a really beautiful process. And maybe we could use the word brutiful, because maybe sometimes it feels really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it's such a treasure chest for our expansion. And I do also think it's sort of a beautiful thing to work through with your partner, that you can work your way through these uncomfortable situations, and that maybe even you feel closer afterwards, and it creates more intimacy and more trust with each other, that you can share some of these uncomfortable things, and it might feel a little intense at times, but
Right.
but you can work through it.
And we're good examples of that. Generally speaking, that's what happens with us. Almost, I think, basically every time
I don't think we have any, like, outlying, skeletons in the closet.
Yeah, not that you know of. Yeah, not that you know of. Yeah.
It's almost like relationship hygiene or something. You know, you brush your teeth every day and you do other things. Like sometimes just, you know, talking about some of these things it just keeps things like clean and pure and healthy in the relationship.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise, like resentment can form or other, you know.
Yes.
So
And it's almost like, I don't know how you think about this, but I feel kind of like the things that I'm uncomfortable to talk about, maybe with you, are the things that maybe it would be good to talk about those things if there's some stuff there. If it's and I guess what I'm saying is like this sort of idea of like leaning in a non-reactionary way, in as peaceful way as possible, but not to be like scared of talking about some maybe vulnerable things, some uncomfortable things.
yeah, it's a lot easier to do too when you're not really concerned with how people will interpret what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you're able to like hold an awareness that you just need to express your truth and how they take it's really their business. If you can kind of hold that a bit, just detach a little bit while you're sharing, it'll come out more authentically. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So I might have already said it, but I feel like the last point I can think of, there's probably more, but is just an orientation of gratitude for the opportunity to engage in this type of interaction, which ultimately shows you so much about yourself, and can just be transformative if we can move through it.
Yeah.
In this way.
Yeah, and like just remembering that that's why it's happening. That's why, and it's your plan. Like you knew, like almost before I said the thing this morning, you know, there's an aspect of myself that's observing all of that, also observing you.
Yes.
Aware of what's likely to go on with this interaction.
Yeah.
And giving it the green light, and then it goes, right? And so you can just sort of be aware that you're just like participating in this little drama.
Yes.
And you can think of it that way, like this is a little drama that was enacted. It has a beginning and an end. And
it's ultimately for my benefit.
And like any good movie, after it's done, you analyze it, you think about it, you think about the symbolism, you think about how it relates to your experience in the past, whatever, right? Wherever these paths take you.
Yes.
But if you can look at it from that sort of detached place, then it's a lot easier to, in my experience, to do all the healing stuff and be more authentic with it all.
And I think what we're touching on throughout this whole conversation and in so many other things that we talk about is a little bit of this toggling between what we're experiencing as the human and the more meta, higher perspective of sort of what's really happening for our expansion.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that I'm still sort of figuring out the balance of all the time in a way.
Me too.
But I want to honor whatever my human is experiencing. I want, without judgment, and just honor and compassion for what the human is experiencing. And then to be like, and it's all for my greater good at the same time. I'm
starting to notice, I'm doing the same thing, the balancing. I'm starting to notice, for me, it's actually harder to notice the human stuff. Like when I say human stuff, I guess just like the sensitivity of the human self that's always, or the ego, I guess I could say.
Yeah.
Like my egoic self or my personality or whatever. That stuff it's not as evident to me anymore. I have to put it through an effort to like, what is this person talking about? Like, I don't get it. And then I have to like, I don't know. So I have trouble. It's almost like I'm too much in the higher, not necessarily too much. I shouldn't say that it's the wrong state, but I have trouble getting down and relating sometimes now.
You mean to other people when they're having some human stuff, it sometimes it's hard for you to relate to them.
Yeah, like so I'm like oblivious that I'm causing or contributing or participating in this type of thing until it becomes very obvious. But I'm oblivious because these perspectives they don't hold a lot of energy from, so I can't even see how someone could not get what I'm saying, or I don't know how to I don't know how to describe it, but I basically don't anticipate that what I'm saying would contribute to any type of issue. Because there's no issue. So what's happening? So yeah, I can have trouble, like, but I'm doing the toggling thing too, trying to look at things from different perspectives, and I've just noticed that, like, I tend to just go the other way, and because a lot of that ego or the human sort of feelings and all the frustrations that go on are like a lot of it's just not, for me, I guess just for me, a lot of it isn't very useful. It's like I know that story, like I know all that already. I don't really need to go in there and sit in that. So I'm trying to figure out that whole balance. Who knows? But yeah, there totally is a higher perspective, and then like the lower perspective, higher self, lower self, or however we say it, human, and or higher dimensional, higher frequency, whatever. I don't know. There's definitely multiple perspectives, and then choosing how we look at it and engage with it. Yeah.
And I think just sort of washing the entire situation just with love and compassion and faith towards the other person, towards yourself, towards the relationship, towards the situation. Just, I don't know, I like to just envision just enveloping just the whole thing in love, and compassion.
Definitely.
And not non-judgment. Just give yourself and everyone else a break.
Yeah, that's give yourself a break. Relax a little bit. Laugh at yourself a bit. You know, make fun of yourself a little bit if it helps. That's what I do.
Like whatever that means. Yeah, it could be just like being super loving to yourself, or whatever it is. All right.
I think that's about it. I think
that's probably about it.
It's an hour and 8 minutes, looks like.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you so much. Please let us know about your experiences with anything that we've talked about triggering, any strategies, anything that has helped you, and about stories. And thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
So much love to everybody. Bye.
Bye.